That town didn't have a name on any map, just dust, a dry well, and the eyes of people who'd rather not remember. A strange woman appeared with a child. They didn't say much, but everyone watched. And up on the hill, a man lived alone in a wooden cabin, where at night you could hear the scratch of a pencil sketching things no one dared to tell. Someone had run. Someone was waiting. And someone carrying darkness from the past was coming back. There are words that never need saying, scars that never need showing. But sometimes silence tells the biggest story of all. If you're drawn to quiet mysteries, to broken souls more real than legends, then like, subscribe, and leave a note for those who've walked through fire and still kept their heart. Because somewhere between scorched grass and a sun-stained sky is a story you won't forget. The wind had teeth that day, dry blunt teeth that chewed at the hems of dresses and the corners of old signs. It howled through the skeletal bones of a town too tired to care, dragging dust across cracked windows and long-forgotten boot prints. The sun hung above, like judgment, harsh and unsympathetic, casting long shadows over a place that had stopped dreaming years ago. Lillian Grace stood at the edge of the main street, a worn carpetbag in one hand, the other gripping her son's shoulder. Toby, barely 6, clutched a ragged toy horse, its mane unraveling, and one button eye missing. His small face was tight with a kind of quit only children who've seen too much wear. He didn't speak. Hadn't for days. Not since Kansas. Lillian's boots were scuffed soles near to splitting. She wore a high-necked blouse, pale blue linen, with a frayed collar, tucked into a brown wool skirt, stitched too many times to count. Her wide-brimmed hat, shadowed eyes both watchful and exhausted. The sun lit the auburn strands of hair, escaping her bun like threads of fire. She was too slender, bones sharp at the wrists, but there was something upright in her posture, something unyielding. Even in dust-caked clothes, she carried a grace that didn't belong here, something that hadn't yet been taken. They paused near the edge of the general store, where a rusted bell hung above the door, but no one bothered to ring it anymore. The sign above swung on one hinge, Dry Creek, a name more warning than welcome. The town was barely more than a scatter of buildings, stitched along one dusty vein of road. Its heart had once been silver, but the mines were dryened. Now only ghosts of ambition lingered in its boarded windows. They passed men leaning against porch beams, mouths half full with tobacco and judgment. No one offered help. One woman pulled her child indoors just from the look in Lillian's eyes. Another whispered behind a threadbare curtain. She didn't blame them. Her kind of trouble was the kind that stuck, the kind that spread like smoke. Toby tugged at her sleeve once, pointing to a wooden fence where someone had nailed up faded posters, circus girls, a traveling preacher, and a black and white sketch of a horse mid-gallop. He stared at it for a moment too long. He likes to draw horses, Lillian said softly, more to herself than anyone for one. And soldiers. He used to say he'd be a rider one day. They found a room above the feed store. Mrs. Edna Groves, a widow with stiff fingers and Seth's eyes, let them in, without questions. Her apron was smudged with flour and tobacco ash. "You pay with chores till you've got coin," Edna said, gesturing up the narrow stairs. "I don't like silence, but I hate lies more." She handed Lillian a broom and a chipped iron key. "Thank you," Lillian murmured. "Don't thank me yet. Room's cold and the window sticks. But it don't leak, and you'll hear the rooster. He ain't shy." That night, Lillian scrubbed the wood floor while Toby stared at the ceiling. She didn't tell him it was okay. He'd stopped believing those words too early. Instead, she hummed a hymn her mother once sang, voice cracking on the high notes. Toby turned his head just slightly and blinked at her. It was enough. Morning came gray and grudging. Grit in the wind, chill in the air. Lillian braided her hair back tight and pinned it beneath her hat. She asked around for work, was turned away 3 times before the bakery across from the livery gave her a try. By noon, she was elbow-deep in flower hands, moving out of memory more than purpose. Her back ached, and sweat clung to her spine despite the draft. That's when she heard them, the harsh laughs, the clink of glass, and her name curling through the air like smoke. Lillian Grace, one of the cowhands, drawled. She turned, heart thudding. 2 men stood just outside the doorframe, drunk, smirking. Not Beau. Not yet. But friends of his, she knew that much. They stepped closer, boots scraping the floorboards. I heard your husband died. Shame. You're looking mighty lonely. I'm busy, she said flatly, stepping back. Ain't no call to be rude, darling. We're just... A shadow fell across the doorway. He was barefoot, shirtless, beneath an open canvas duster, chest streaked with sweat and wood shavings. Hair dark and tousled, falling to his jawline. Eyes like dusk before thunder. Quiet, unreadable. Wyatt Crow. He didn't speak, just stood there with a coil of rope in one hand and an axe handle in the other. The air changed around him. Dense, charged. The cowhands shifted, laughed again, but it rang thinner now. Just passing through, one muttered. They left. Wyatt glanced at Lillian, then down to the floor. Ma'am, he said simply, voice low and hoarse, like it hadn't been used in weeks. She nodded, unsure if gratitude would make things worse. When he turned to go, Toby peeked out from behind the bread rack. Their eyes met, child and man. Something passed between them. Not fear, not quite hope, just recognition, quiet and clean. The wind picked up again, and Lillian stepped outside. Wyatt was halfway across the street, the coat flaring like a worn flag behind him. She didn't call after him, but something deep in her, buried under ash and fear, leaned forward and listened. The wind had shifted by midweek. Clouds gathered low and purple over the ridge, pressing down like a hand bracing for a blow. Lillian Grace had grown used to reading the sky storm coming. She gathered her shawl tighter and nudged Toby toward the tree line beyond Dry Creek's edge. They walked uphill through brush and pine, a path narrow and uneven. Toby's small fingers clutched hers, then let go as he darted toward a patch of wild apple trees, red fruit peeking through the green like blushing secrets. He didn't speak, but he smiled just once, and it lit something in her that hadn't burned in months. Only what you can carry, she said gently, and he nodded, stuffing apples into the burlap sack she'd brought. She bent to help, hands brushing grass damp with mist. The air carried the scent of wet bark, of something old and untouched. Then thunder rumbled, a low stretching groan across the valley. Lillian straightened, hearts ticking up. The sky was darker now. She scanned for shelter, but found none until she spotted a cabin, half hidden by the rise of land and a thicket of juniper. Come on, she called to Toby. Storm's near. They ran, apples bouncing in the sack, until they reached the porch. It creaked under their feet. She raised her hand to knock, but the door opened first. Wyatt Crow. He looked almost the same, barefoot, still shirt, clinging to him from fresh work hair, damp at the temples. For a moment, he just seared. Then he stepped aside. Storm's bad, he said simply. You can wait it out here. Lillian hesitated. Every part of her screamed caution. She glanced at Toby, who looked up at Wyatt like he was a character in one of his drawings, half outlaw, half guardian. Then she nodded. The cabin was small, one room, with a hearth, a cotta table made of old barnwood. Tools hung from pegs. Boots lined near the wall, all worn. The fire crackled low, a pot hanging above it. Bites, Wyatt said, motioning to a bench. She did, clutching Toby close. He poured water from a jug into a tin cup and handed it to the boy. Then he turned to the pot and began stirring. The scent rose slowly. Onion rabbit, maybe thyme. Her stomach tightened at the smell. "You hungry?" he asked without looking up. She hesitated, then said, "Yes." He ladled soup into 2 bowls and placed them gently in front of her and Toby, then stepped back. No hovering, no questions. Just spicy. Toby picked up the spoon and began to eat. Fast at first, then slower. Lillian followed. The warmth spread through her chest like a match lit in a frozen room. She blinked hard. "Thank you," she murmured. Wyatt nodded once, then sat across the room near the door, sharpening a blade slowly with a whetstone. His silence wasn't cold. It was measured, like he didn't speak unless words were necessary. Toby finished first. He looked around, then walked to the wall where a saddle rested on a rack. His fingers touched the leather. "Yours?" he asked Wyatt. Wyatt looked up. "My father's." Toby nodded solemnly, then sat cross-legged near the hearth. Lillian watched him, watched the way his body seemed lighter here. "It's a good saddle," Toby said. Wyatt smiled just a little. "That it is." Outside, the rain began in earnest. Sheets of water pounded the roof. Thunder cracked like rifle shots in the hills. But inside the cabin, everything held. Lillian exhaled slowly. Her fingers relaxed around the bowl. Her shoulders, stiff for so long, lowered by inches. "You live alone?" she asked. Wyatt nodded. "How long since 81? 4 years." That surprised her. She glanced around again. The place was clean, well kept. No bottles, no filth. Just simplicity and purpose. "People in town talk," she said quietly. Wyatt didn't flinch. "They say you killed 3 men. He didn't deny it, just kept sharpening. One of them was Bo Callister's brother. Still no denial. "Is it true?" He set down the blade, looked up. "Yes." She waited for more. None came. "Why?" He studied her for a long moment, then said, "They were guarding a prison cart. The woman inside hadn't done what they said she did. They laughed while she begged." Lillian swallowed. "I warned them. They didn't listen." She sat back. Not shocked, not comforted. Just understanding. Wyatt rose and walked to the fire, added a log. Sparks rose like fireflies. "I don't regret stopping them," he said. "I regret I couldn't do it sooner." The room was silent except for the rain. Toby had fallen asleep near the fire, head resting on a folded blanket. Lillian stared at him a long moment, then turned to Wyatt. "Thank you," she said again. He nodded. "I'm not used to kindness," she admitted. "Neither am I," he said. She smiled faintly, then leaned back against the wall. For the first time in a long while, her body let go. The thunder rolled on, but it felt farther away now. The days after the storm slipped by like mist, quiet, weightless, not quite real. Lillian found herself returning to the cabin on the hill more often than she meant to. Sometimes with Toby, sometimes with bread or stew, once with nothing but the need to breathe without flinching. Wyatt didn't question it. He let her come and go, never asked why, never asked for more. One morning she arrived to find him clearing a patch of earth behind the cabin. A pile of old boards leaned against a stump. "Building something?" she asked, setting down a basket of eggs. "Chicken coop," he said. "You mentioned wanting hens." She blinked. "I didn't think you were listening." "I was." So they built it together. The sun was hot on their backs. Toby handed them nails, learning names for tools with wide eyes. Wyatt showed him how to knot rope, patient and sure. Toby watched every movement, fingers mimicking until they got it right. Lillian didn't miss the way her son smiled more easily now. Later, as they sat under the porch eave sipping cool water, Wyatt glanced at her. "He's a good boy," he said. He had to grow up fast, she murmured. Silence stretched soft and heavy. That evening after supper, Toby fell asleep by the fire again. The night was still. Lillian and Wyatt sat on opposite ends of the bench, closer than before. I told you my husband died, she said. Wyatt looked over, waiting. I lied. Or, I thought I didn't. He was shot last year. I saw the blood. Thought it was enough. Wyatt said nothing, just watched the flames. Bo Callister. That was his name. He wasn't always cruel, not at first. But something broke in him. Started hitting when he drank. Then when he didn't. The day he pulled a knife on Toby, I ran. She swallowed. I thought he was dead. But I've seen men come back from worse. Wyatt nodded once. They do. You were right about him, weren't you? Even before I said his name. Wyatt didn't move. I've seen the Callister kind before. Smile like charm, fists like iron. Lillian folded her hands. You think he'll come looking? I'd bet on it. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just nodded. Then I'll be ready. Wyatt turned to her, eyes catching firelight. You don't have to be ready alone. She looked at him, then really looked. The scar down his jaw, the tired set of his shoulders, the quiet strength in his voice. Why'd you come here? She asked. He paused, then said to disappear. From what Wyatt stood stoked the fire. Shadows danced up the log walls. There was a woman, he began slowly. Camp follower. Traveled with the regiment. Not much older than a girl. Cooked mended shirts, smiled when you tipped your hat. He sat back down, voice low. One night, some of the men got drunk. Thought it was funny to pull her into the circle. One hit her. The others laughed. Lillian didn't breathe. I stepped in. Didn't plan to kill. Just meant to stop them. One pulled his gun. I was faster. He looked away. Killed 3 before the others backed off. She ran on. I never saw her again. Court-martial never came. War was ending. But I didn't stay. Silence. I couldn't be a hero after that. Couldn't be a soldier either. So I left. Lillian's voice was soft. You saved her. I killed men. Because you had to. Wyatt shook his head. Because I couldn't watch anymore. They sat a long while. Outside, wind rustled the trees. Inside, the fire snapped steady and sure. You're not what they say, Lillian whispered. He looked at her, something breaking loose behind his eyes. Neither are you, he said. She smiled then. Small. True. He didn't move closer. Didn't need to. The space between them had already changed. That night, when she and Toby walked back to town, the stars were out wide and silver bright. Lillian looked up at them, and for the first time in years didn't feel small. She felt seen, and maybe, just maybe, safe enough to start again. It began with the sound of hooves. Heavy, deliberate, too many to count. They echoed through the canyon like a warning, and settled into Dry Creek with the weight of things long buried. Bo Callister had arrived. He came with a string of wagons and men in clean coats, boots polished, guns visible but holstered. His face hadn't changed much, square jaw, white smile, eyes like shale. But the years had added polish. He wore a city man's coat, now dark blue with gold stitching, and gloves soft as lambskin. A brass pin gleamed on his lapel. Callister Trading and Supply. A merchant, they said. A businessman. But the town quieted all the same. Lillian saw him from the window of Edna's shop. Her hands froze mid-sweep. Her breath caught. Toby stood behind her, clutching a pencil and the corner of his latest drawing. She turned quickly. Stay inside, she whispered. But Mama, promise me, Toby. He nodded too fast. She stepped outside. The wind had gone still. Bo was already shaking hands with Sheriff Hodges near the saloon. Hodges, red-faced and half asleep most days, stood straighter now, pulling at his belt. Bo saw her. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He tipped his hat slowly. "Well now," he drawled, voice syrup thick. "Aren't you a sight?" Lillian didn't move. She felt her spine lock. Bo stepped closer, boots clean as new money. "Didn't expect to see you in a place like this, Lily." "Don't call me that." He raised a brow. "Still got fight." "I like that." He glanced around. "Where's the boy?" "He's not yours." "That ain't what the law says. Ain't what blood says either." Behind them, Hodges cleared his throat. Now, no need to get stirred. Mr. Callister's got papers. Legitimate business." Lillian stared at him. "You know what he is." Hodges looked away. "He's registered. Paid up. If there's history, that's between you two." History. As if pain were just something that expired with time. Bo smiled again, wider. "I'm here for trade. Roads are opening west. I've got a warehouse to build. Nothing personal." He stepped in close, his breath warm and sour. "But if I find out you've been keeping my son from me..." Lillian didn't flinch. "You'll do what, beat me again? Like last time?" His eyes flared. Just for a second. Then the smile snapped back. "Enjoy your little cabin life," he said, turning on his heel. "Won't last long." That night, Lillian didn't sleep. She sat by Toby's bed watching the rise and fall of his chest, her heart thudding with every creak of the wind. She went to Wyatt at dawn. He opened the door before she knocked, as if he'd been waiting. "He's here," she said. "I know." She stepped inside. The fire was already burning. Her hands trembled. "He saw me." "He asked for Toby." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" "That he has papers. That he's building something." But it wasn't business in his eyes. "He's watching. Waiting." Why, Wyatt nodded. "He's marking territory. Letting you know he's got power here." She sank onto the bench. "The sheriff won't help." "I figured he wouldn't." Wyatt stood in silence, then reached under the bed, pulled out a long case, opened it slowly. Inside was a rifle, clean, oiled, worn at the grip. "I didn't want to pick this up again," he said. "You won't have to," she whispered. "Not yet." But they both knew it was coming. The next day, Bo didn't visit Edna's. He went straight to the schoolhouse where Toby had started spending mornings. Lillian saw him through the window. Toby stood stiff, small, clutching his sketch pad. Bo crouched, said something. Toby didn't answer. Lillian burst in. "Get away from him." Bo rose slow. "Was just saying hello." "You don't get to say anything to him." He looked at Toby, then back at her. "Boy looks like me. He looks like who raised him." He stepped closer. "You really think Crow's gonna keep you safe? That killer?" She froze. "Oh, he didn't tell you," Bo said, grinning. "He's the one who shot my brother. Left him bleeding in a ravine like a dog." He chuckled. "And now he's playing house with my wife. Ain't that sweet?" Lillian's hands curled into fisty fists. "You want revenge," she said coldly. "You'll get it. Just don't pretend it's about Toby." He stared at her for a long time. "You always were smart, Lily. That's what made it fun." She didn't answer, didn't blink. He tipped his hat. "See you soon." She waited until he left, then knelt beside Toby. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "He scares me." She pulled him into her arms. "He won't get to hurt you again. I promise." That night, she and Wyatt sat in silence. He finally said, "I killed his brother. Not with pride. But I'd do it again." "I know," she said. "He wants me to bleed before I die. Wants to break me slow." Lillian looked into the fire. "Then don't let him. We fight together." Wyatt nodded. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills. Smoke curled from the chimney. And war, it seemed, was coming home. Wyatt stood in the doorway at dawn, bag-packed rifle slung across his back. His silhouette was etched by the cold light, as if the very shadows didn't want him to go. Lillian's voice cracked as she said, "You're leaving." "It's the only way," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "If I go, he'll follow me. It'll keep you and Toby safe." Behind her, Toby stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Where is he going, Mama?" Lillian couldn't speak. She didn't have to. Wyatt stepped forward, crouched before the boy. "I've got to take a trip, kiddo." Toby's lip quivered. "But you promised." Wyatt froze. "You promised you'd help us build the fence. You promised you'd stay." Wyatt glanced up at Lillian, and in her eyes he saw the same plea. "Please don't go," Toby whispered. The silence after that was heavy. Wyatt slowly stood and set his bag down. "I'm staying." Later that morning, Bo arrived with documents, a swagger, and a lawyer from Helena in tow. They met outside Edna's shop, where half the town lingered like buzzards. "I'm here for my son, Bo," said voice like gravel. "He's not yours," Lillian answered. "Law says different." He held up papers. "Signed and sealed. I've got claim." Lillian's jaw tightened. "You gave up that right when you raised your fists." Bo stepped closer. "Don't make me take him by force." Before anyone could react, Wyatt stepped into view. "You'll have to go through me." Bo didn't flinch. "That the same voice you used when you shot my brother?" Wyatt didn't answer, just stood his ground. Sheriff Hodges arrived, puffing hard. Now, this is a civil matter. This is a matter of protection," Lillian snapped. But Hodges, as always, did nothing. That evening, Wyatt and Edna sat by candlelight, scribbling a letter. They sealed it with wax and handed it to a boy who rode faster than the wind toward the nearest army outpost 2 counties over. "We have a plan," Wyatt said, "but it depends on timing." The next day passed in a tension so thick it turned the air to syrup. Then at dusk the silence broke. Gunfire. It started near the well at the edge of the woods. Wyatt dove behind the split-rail fence, returning fire. 2 of Bo's hired men flanked the path, weapons raised. Lillian pulled Toby behind the chicken coop, shielding him with her body. A shot grazed Wyatt's shoulder, sending blood down his sleeve. But he kept moving, pressing toward the ridge. Suddenly, the sound of hoofbeats, sharp and fast. From the north, a column of soldiers burst from the tree line, uniforms dusted and rifles raised. "Hold your fire," one shouted. Bo froze. His men scattered. Within minutes, the fight was over. Bo was on his knees, arms yanked behind him. Blood on his collar, rage in his eyes. Wyatt leaned against a post, panting, blood dripping. Lillian ran to him, pressed her scarf to the wound. "You stayed," she whispered. "Couldn't leave," he murmured. "Not from this." A soldier approached. This man, he gestured to Bo, is wanted in 3 counties. "For what?" Lillian asked. The soldier hesitated, then looked at Toby. "For mass murder." Lillian's face paled. Toby gripped her hand tightly. "He used to run freight runs through backcountry," the soldier continued. "Once a wagon of children vanished. Only one survived." Toby's eyes widened. Slowly he nodded. "It was you?" Wyatt asked gently. Toby nodded again. "Bo buried them alive," the soldier said grimly. "This boy's testimony confirms what we've suspected. We can take him in, for good." Lillian dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around her son. He trembled, but didn't cry. "You're safe now," she whispered, and this time she believed it. The snow melted slow that year, like the land itself was learning to breathe again. Drips from the eaves pattered like distant applause, and the once hardened soil turned soft beneath bare feet. Inside the cabin, Wyatt sat on the edge of the bed, shoulder bandaged, pine dull now, but lingering. Lillian knelt beside him with a bowl of warm water and a cloth, wringing it gently before dabbing the edge of his wound. "You're not very good at staying still," she murmured with a small smile. "Never had much practice," Wyatt replied, his voice quiet. She dipped the cloth again. "You didn't have to stay." He looked at her, soft but steady. "Yes, I did." Footsteps shuffled outside. Toby stood in the doorway, one arm wrapped around a wooden horse carved from an old fence post. His voice, uncertain but full of heart, broke the silence. "Pa." Wyatt froze. Lillian's hand trembled slightly. Slowly, Wyatt turned toward the boy. "Can you help me fix the saddle on my horse?" Wyatt cleared his throat. "Yeah, kid. Be right out." Lillian watched Toby disappear back into the sunlit yard, then met Wyatt's eyes. No words, just a shared breath, thick with gratitude and disbelief. Spring came, gentle like an old friend finally returned. Green peeked through the ash, and birdsong chased away the quiet that had once felt like morning. The town began to stir too. The church doors, long shut from fear and shame, creaked open one Sunday morning. The bell rang, rusty but proud. Inside, the pews were half full. Faces familiar, some cautious, others kind. At the front stood Reverend Miles, returned from back east, with a Bible worn from travel. Lillian stood beside Wyatt in a dress the color of wildflowers. Toby held her hand, fidgeting with the edge of his vest. Edna Grove stood behind them, chin high, hat pinned proud. The ceremony was simple. No rings carved from gold, no choir. Just a few words, two steady voices, and the hush of a town learning to believe again. When Reverend Miles said, "You may kiss your bride," Wyatt didn't move quickly. He looked at Lillian first, seeking something, permission, peace, and when she nodded, he leaned in. The kiss was soft, sure. Not fire and thunder, but warmth, like something long hoped for, finally resting in its place. Edna clapped sharp and sincere. A few townsfolk followed. And in that moment, the town wasn't a place of ghosts. It was a place beginning again. Weeks passed. The cabin grew brighter, not just from sun, but from the rhythm of shared life. Lillian hummed when she swept. Toby strung twine between fence posts, and Wyatt spent long hours on the porch sketching. He didn't draw shadows anymore. One late afternoon, with the wind smelling of clover, Toby tore across the meadow barefoot. He whooped, loud arms stretched like wings. His laughter echoed across the slope. Wyatt sat with a sketchbook open on his lap, pencil dancing across the page. He caught the curve of the boy's sprint, the sway of tall grass, and the unmistakable shape of joy. Lillian stepped onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea. She glanced over his shoulder. "Drawing him again?" Wyatt nodded. "Can't help it. Never seen anything so alive." She leaned into him, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You ever gonna show him all those?" "Maybe someday," he said, "when he's old enough to know the weight behind him." They sat together as dusk settled, watching Toby roll in the grass carefree. Wyatt added the final stroke, a smile. Big, open, unburdened. He hadn't drawn one like that in years. Sometimes the West didn't need saving. It just needed someone to stay. Some say the West is where you go to start over. Others say it's where you go to forget. But for Wyatt and Lillian, it became the place to stay. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for a broken land is not to leave it. If this story lit a small warmth in you, leave a note for Toby, for Wyatt, for Lillian, or simply share the name of the town where you are listening from. And if you'd like to walk with us through the next journey, like, comment, and subscribe too, because somewhere between red dust and a setting sun, another story is waiting to be told.